Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are continuing with Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 13, text number 23. Upadrashtanumanta cha bharata bhokta maheshwaraha paramatmeti chapyukto dehi asmin purusha paraha. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the super soul. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we're going to do a few verses today from this chapter 13. And the summary of these few verses today is going to give us knowledge about who is to be considered as a sensible person, someone who is really, really intelligent, someone who can understand these verses today should be understood to be a sensible person. Now, the verse that we did last time, about a month ago, which was verse number 22, wherein Krishna told Arjuna that the living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of material nature. Now, this is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. This is what he taught us in 22. But here in verse 23, which I just read, Krishna is describing the process of how this verse 22 is to be implemented, So in other words, he's talking about understanding or taking on knowledge about the super soul, the Paramatma within the heart, the super soul in the heart. Now, we've heard before in this chapter also where Krishna says that he goes in the heart of all living entities, in all the different bodies. So I definitely had another body in my previous life. Now I'm in this body. And if I come back in this material world, then it's going to be a different body. But Krishna has been traveling along with me, just like he's been traveling with all the living entities in different bodies. Now, from this, we can understand that he's not an ordinary soul. We are ordinary spirit souls, but he is the supreme spiritual super soul. He is the supreme personality of Godhead. And that is the reason he knows what's going on in all the bodies of all living entities. Now, even though he is the witness to all our activities, but he stays aloof. He does not get entangled in our activities. He's just the overseer, he's the controller, he's the transcendental enjoyer, he is the overseer, and he is also the sanctioner. So we are the Atma and he is the Paramatma. That is the difference. Now, one may say that how is it possible that he's present in all the bodies, all the different bodies? So that is because he is the Supreme Lord. He is the Param Atma. And that is the reason he also has the authority to give the sanction. Now, we may have different desires, we have unlimited desires. So does that mean all desires are fulfilled? No, he's the one who has to first sanction them. In chapter 15, we learn where Krishna says, Sarvasya Chaham Hridi Sanivishto. I'm situated in everyone's heart. And he says, from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So we have these three choices But we make the choice, what do we want? And based on that, Krishna sanctions our choice. So very important to understand Krishna's position, our position, that we are spirit soul, and he is the super soul. We are the minute parts of that supreme Lord. We've already heard Mama Evamsha Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. We are amshas, we are parts of the Supreme Lord. Now, most people have the tendency to reject the Lord or to reject his sanction, you see. And why does that happen? Krishna says in the previous chapters, Aprakrite kriyamanani gune karmani sab ahankara vimhud atma kartaham iti manyate. He says it's because of ahankar, because of pride. You see, we think that we are the doers, we are the controllers, we are the ones who are dominating. But no, he is the actual controller. So an important question came up in my mind, that since Krishna is saying he's traveling with us in different bodies, why is he doing that? It's out of compassion. He wants to help us. He wants to guide us to go back to our original home, which is the spiritual world. That is where we've come from. And because we are in this material world, we are actually, you can say, misusing our minute independence. You see, we are misusing our intelligence instead of making full use of this rare human form for self-realization. Most people are only interested in gratifying the senses. Most are not interested in spiritual life or spirituality. But Krishna is so kind. He's our Supreme Father. He is given us this rare human form, and along with that, he's given us a manual, the Bhagavad Gita, the owner's manual, which can guide us. So he's guiding us within as the super soul and without as the Bhagavad Gita. And why is he doing that? Because he knows that we, being the spirit souls, our nature is to be happy, to be blissful. But because we are in contact with this material nature in the material world, we are not experiencing that permanent happiness. We are having a happiness which is, temporary. It has a beginning and it has an end, and it's not giving us satisfaction. So Krishna knows we all want to be happy, but unfortunately most don't know where to find happiness, you see. But Bhagavad Gita is showing us the way, the path to a permanent happiness. In fact, in chapter number 5, Krishna, towards the end of the chapter, which is Karma Yoga, the title is Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, he says, gives us the peace formula, you see. Until and unless one is peaceful, one cannot be happy. So he gives us a peace formula. Bhoktaram yagna tapasam sarva loka maheshwara. As soon as we can understand the position of Krishna, that he is the Lord of all demigods, of all planets, of all living entities, then it is going to bring us peace of mind. So if we, use our intelligence, make our faith very firm by this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, then it is going to lead us to the path of permanent happiness. Now, in verse number 24, the very next verse, Krishna says, he's explaining how to understand the relationship between the super soul and the spirit soul, that is us and him. He says, one who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of modes of nature is sure to attain liberation and birth here again, regardless of his present position, which means he is not going to be born, he will not take birth again here, regardless of what his present position is. So he is actually showing us a very simple process to get liberated and break the cycle of birth and death. Very, very important. So to do that, we need to understand, how does this material nature work? who we really are, what is our prescribed duty, how these three modes, ignorance, passion, and goodness, how do they affect us, how we can, stay away from the effect of these three modes, how we can transcend these three modes. All this we will learn in the next chapter, number 14. But right now, Krishna is trying to explain that if we try to understand Bhagavad Gita and follow it, then there's going to be liberation, no more birth in this material world. Now, it's important to qualify. We need to qualify for liberation. So if we follow the Bhagavad Gita step by step, then what will happen? Our consciousness is going to change with the help of knowledge. Our faith is going to become more firm. There's going to be cleansing of the heart. The unwanted things from the heart will be removed, like lust, anger, greed, pride, envy, illusion, whatever it may be, in whatever degree it may be, that all will all be cleansed out of the heart. And we will realize the super soul within the heart. We will realize who we really are, and we will be qualified to go back to the spiritual world. Now, question is, how long is it going to take? That would depend on our sincere endeavors. If we have very good association, if we associate with like-minded people, if we associate with those who are following Bhagavad Gita, and we are sincere in our efforts, we are serious in following this process, we are serious about learning it and putting it into practice. You see, let me give you an example of GPS. Now, if I have a goal in mind, I have a destination in mind that I want to go from, point A to point B. Now, it's important for me to know, where am I right now? What is this point A? What is the address? Where am I? And I need to know, do I really want to go to point B? So GPS system needs to have both the information, where are you and where do you want to go? So it's important to understand that I am right now in the material world and my destination is the spiritual world. So Bhagavad Gita is the GPS. It tells us who we are, where are we, and how to go to a place from where we do not have to come back. And there's a very beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tatva tyaktva deham punarjanma neti mameti. So Arjuna, there's no punarjanma, there's no next birth. If we can understand from the Bhagavad Gita the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and his activities. And that is possible to understand when we can learn from a teacher, from a bona fide certified teacher of Bhagavad Gita. Now in verse number 25, Krishna says that some perceive the super soul within themselves through meditation, others through the cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without fruitive desires. So in this verse, he's giving us other methods for liberation. Now, 3 ways to perceive the super soul. One is through meditation, like the Ashtanga yogis, they meditate for years and years and years with the goal in mind that they can perceive the Paramatma, the super soul within the heart. Now, there are others who like to take knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita and understand the super soul. Whereas there is a third category of those people who like to do their work, do karma yoga without desiring to enjoy the fruits of their activities. Now, excuse me, meditation, as I told you, is, compared to like an Ashtanga yogi who is meditating on Paramatma within the heart. Now, those who are trying to understand the Paramatma through knowledge, you can say the other Sankhya yogis, how they want to know how to understand the super soul, by being detached from matter. They don't want to do anything to do with the matter. Of course, the ancient Sankhya philosophy, the process of devotional service was given by Lord Kapila, not by the modern Sankhya philosophy given by the atheist Kapila. So there's a difference between these two. So though the third option is working without fruitive desires. Now that is called Nishkam Karma Yoga, which means there is no desire to enjoy the fruits of the activities, which means detached work, which is also good, because if if we try to enjoy the fruits of our activities, then we get entangled in that cycle of karma. But in chapter 6, we learned the very last verse of chapter 6, where Krishna explains to us, after giving us the whole yoga ladder, karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, ashtanga yoga, bhakti yoga, he gives the very last verse, the summary of chapter 6, where he says, yoginam api sarvesham madgatin antaratman. The topmost yogi, he says, is the one who thinks of me within the heart. So here, Krishna is giving options that if one cannot meditate, if one cannot follow Sankhya Yoga, if one cannot do Nishkam Karma Yoga, then what to do? Then in the very next verse, number 26, he gives us the next option. He says that it's important let me read that verse to you from the Bhagavad Gita, which is verse number 26. Trying to pull it up. He says, again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. How very important. So there's another option to transcend, to become liberated, to, break the cycle of birth and death and get liberated. And he says to worship Krishna upon hearing from others, like we are hearing from the Bhagavad Gita. And there are some who have the tendency to hear from authorities. So it's a very important word, authorities, not hear Bhagavad Gita from just anybody. We need to hear it from someone who is in the disciplic succession, like we learned in chapter 4, Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Rajarshya Vidu. Krishna says this is how this knowledge should be received, through disciplic succession from authority. So when we hear from authority, then Krishna says you get liberated. There is no more birth. So what is the key word? Hearing. Hearing is very, very important. And if one hears with full faith, with the help of knowledge, make the faith very firm, then one is able to break the cycle of birth and death. Then it's not difficult at all. So with hearing, we can make progress. And that is why in every class, after every class, we do some chanting. We do the hearing, we chant, and we hear the holy names of the Lord, because that hearing of the holy names cleanses the heart. So it's nice to take advantage of this opportunity. And it is possible to understand Bhagavad Gita if we chant on a daily basis. Otherwise, it just becomes knowledge, dry knowledge. There is no realization. It is not everyone that gets the opportunity to hear Bhagavad Gita. It's very, very rare. So we should take advantage of this. And, faithful hearing is very important. Now, the topic for today was, who is considered to be a sensible person? So from all that we have heard today, from verse 22 through 26, we can understand that the summary of these verses, where Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna, is that one who hears the Bhagavad Gita and puts it into practice, one who understands who we really are, that we are the spirit soul. Who is Krishna? That he is the supreme personality of Godhead. He's the super soul that is traveling within each every living entity's heart in all different bodies to guide them, to take them, to help them go back to Godhead. So that is the main purpose. He's there to guide us from within as the super soul and without as the Bhagavad Gita that he's given. So when we take on this knowledge and to convert this knowledge into realization, knowledge plus practice will become wisdom, which means realization. So if we put this into practice, and the first step is to chant the holy names of the Lord. When we do that, then gradually, by the mercy of the Supreme Lord, we start understanding the spiritual knowledge. We start understanding what is the purpose of human life. Is it just to eat, sleep, and be merry? No, it is much higher. There's a very high purpose for this human form of life. And we need to use this rare human form of life for self-realization, which means understanding the self, that I am the spirit soul. You know, right now we are understanding it theoretically, that I am not this body and I am the spirit soul. But when we put this Bhagavad Gita knowledge into practice by taking the first step of chanting, then what happens? Then gradually our intelligence gets sharpened. Intelligence gets sharpened with the help of knowledge. And Krishna says that those, he says, ye yatham mam prapadyante tam statheva bhajamyam. He says, as one surrenders unto me, I reward them accordingly. So when he sees our sincere endeavors, to learn the Bhagavad Gita, to become more spiritually inclined, to use this human form of life for self-realization, then he helps us from within. It's not possible to understand Bhagavad Gita by just opening it, by reading it, or just by hearing it. Hearing is the first step, but then we need to go to the next step, because if we don't go to the next step, then this knowledge just remains on the platform of knowledge only. It doesn't go any further. So if we can, take advantage of this opportunity to try to understand this Bhagavad Gita, try to understand, you see, the foundational knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is that I am not this body. This is the first lesson that Krishna gives to Arjuna in chapter 2, that you are not this body, because most of the time we are conscious of only the body. It's very rare that we start thinking on the platform of the spirit soul. So from these few verses, we can understand that Krishna is there within the heart as a super soul to guide us. All he wants is that we take the first step. So these are some of the points of these verses from 22 through 26, and we will continue the remaining part of the chapter. It's a long chapter, chapter 13, on next Wednesday. So I'm going to stop here and see if anyone has any questions or comments.